Coach, how you doing?
Hey, Ira, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Looking at the film of the scrimmage, how did you feel like you guys did? It seemed like even when the first team offense scored, they were making plays for the most part, except for the one bust, where I guess the DB got screened by the referee maybe. But
yeah, we ran into the official. We don't want to do that.
Yeah. How did you feel overall?
I thought it was, there were some things that weren't super clean, but for the most part, I thought there was more togetherness just with the unit. I thought some guys really stood out, did a nice job. So it was a competitive scrimmage, if you ask me, I want to stop them every single play for minus yards. Kenny wants to score every play, but that's not real in a team, So there was some back and forth. Proud of the red zone, the way they started on the scrimmage. And, that's been something that we've really tried to emphasize here throughout the spring. So those were important snaps. But yeah, I thought there was some good. I thought there was some stuff that definitely needed to get cleaned up. Actually, got to cut up for it right now.
Kind of expounding off Ira's question there, Adam. The entire spring, I guess, what did you see collectively from the defense from, I guess, start to finish in terms of that togetherness and kind of understanding the scheme?
Just more general communication I thought was better from practice 1 to 15. It wasn't always clean, but the importance of the communication, and there's always a speaker, but there's always got to be a listener too. It's one thing to have somebody talking, but it's another thing to have somebody listening and to be able to be on all one accord. So, I thought that improved as the spring went on, just significantly of getting the guys that need to get the reps, and that happened at linebacker, it happened up front, and it happened in the secondary, especially with some of the newcomers with Kevin and Jamie, and Bam. And I thought it was a really successful spring from that standpoint.
Coach, how's it going?
Good, Perry. How are you, bud?
Good. Thank you for asking. My question was, Jermaine Johnson obviously has been fantastic. We saw in the game what he can do instantly. Was there any thought to maybe switching between Fox and Field, or do you just plan to keep him in the same exact spot?
Yeah, well, right now it was just he played end. He was a little bit of Fox play during the spring, but not much. But I think, those positions, it's always about there's differences in the position, but the more the talent level becomes similar, the more they become interchangeable. So, right now we kept them at end. I thought D-Mac did a nice job coming on. We'll get Keir Thomas back here, and, that'll offer us a little bit more flexibility with how we can use Jermaine. The positive of putting him in the field is, obviously he gives you some presence over there, but I definitely think there's going to be some value in allowing him to play both spots.
Hey, Adam, I wanted to ask, who are some guys that you had last year that are back this year that you saw the biggest leaps with because of the ability to get more of an understanding of what's being asked of them on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, Sidney Williams jumps out right away. We threw him in last year. He deserved to, but, the way it went, next thing you know, Sidney was getting starter reps there towards the end of the year. And, it showed up pretty early, even last year, that he was in position to make plays. He plays with a good pad level, and that showed up here in the spring too. I mean, he's somebody that we're going to rely on heavily, and I saw the growth from where we were at the end of last year to early in spring fairly quickly, and our players see it too. Just his confidence, his communication, his ability to make the play, and usually he's in the right position, takes good natural angles. I thought we really saw some improvement with him. I thought Derek McClendon showed up. He was somebody that played sparingly last year, but just his technique and his development, he got much stronger, had a really good offseason in the weight room, and he was much more consistent this spring, and really happy with the way he's developed. I think in the linebacker room, DeLoach, that was the one that, I thought he did a really nice job at the beginning of last year. Then he kind of fell. He helped us on special teams at times, but he just wasn't very consistent in his play with how we were using him, just his up and down season. But the way he went about his offseason, and then I would say from about practice 4 or 5, when Emmett went down, I thought Kalen DeLoach was our most impactful linebacker just from, his flash, the way he showed up. So I've got really high hopes for him to keep trending in the way he did because he's got some athleticism that's needed in that room. And, so I was happy with those are three of the guys at one at each position that I thought all stood out.
All right, we'll go back to Ira.
You were talking about the communication on the field, and it was very obvious in the spring game where we saw just a lot of guys talking before plays and I guess even during plays. Was the lack of that last year because guys didn't really have a firm grasp of what they were doing, or was that not emphasized as much as it is now in this year two of the system?
Well, I think there's an emphasis on it for sure. I think there's, like I said before, when you're talking, Ira, like you're speaking, I'm listening, and when you gain consistency with who you're doing that with, there becomes more communication, and I just think that's starting to take place now. I think just year two, them being with each other, them understanding how important that is. I think you take it for granted, and then a play happens, and you're like, that was critical. And so you're learning from some errors that happen, and just the maturity of the group. I mean, that back end, I feel like everybody's in the same class. They're all sophomore, we're sophomores, kind of in that realm. So I think they're growing together. And the same thing at linebacker. I mean, you got Kalen DeLoach, DJ Lungy, and Steven Dix. Steven played a bunch of football last year, and then you put Omari in that group, and you just got a lot of guys that are in similar ages that had to go through last year. So I think you're just seeing that all kind of turn over here into the spring, and for sure it's being emphasized, but the execution is where it's at, and I think they realize how important that is for them to be able to communicate with each other, just to be able to play fast.
All right, we'll go back to Brandon.
Yeah, Adam, you mentioned Kalen DeLoach as being someone who kind of 4 or 5 practices in started to kind of turn the corner. I guess what do you think changed? Why all of a sudden did the light bulb click? And I guess how impactful can he be for you guys if that progress continues?
Yeah, well, it was, Brendan, when we watched him, like even last year, there were flashes. He actually started game 1 last year. So there were some flashes that he's shown along the way. It was just the consistency of what that looked like. The physicality, the finishing, and that second scrimmage, I really felt him, and we really felt him. Just, it wasn't just in the plays he made, but just how he was going about his business, how each play, in between each play, he operated, and I would say those last 7 practices, he played at a very consistent physical level. That development needs to continue, but definitely stock was up on him, and I'm excited to see what these next 3 or 4 months has as we roll into 21.
That can be Jim Crosby.
Hi, Coach. You recently had an addition to the defensive staff and Randy Shannon. What are your feelings about that, and what will his role be?
Yeah, well, Randy, he's got an off-the-field role, so it's limited. There's really nothing he can do on the field as far as coaching or anything of that nature. But just, he's number one, been in college football and been in the state of Florida for his entire career. And so just to have somebody with those relationships off the field, somebody with that insight on the field, I just think it's incredibly valuable to myself personally and our entire staff, and in dealing with Randy here over the last several weeks, just his professionalism, he's got a really good outlook on things. I just think his experiences and his relationships in the state, I think we'll see that pay off here.
All right, next will be Antoine Saley from Tallahassee.
Hey, Coach, now that you've had a spring session and that has come to an end, how do the players just keep up that same momentum heading into the summer?
Yeah, well, I think it's the maturity and the team concept. I think this is one of the great things about college football is it's obviously 365 days a year, but there are different pockets and segments of what you emphasize, right? So now the 15 practices end, and now we go into this discretionary period that just basically says we're not going to have organized time, that we're going to sit down with our players, talk football. They're kind of on their own for their development. Now, I do think there's a time that the academics need to finish up the right way, that they're going to have the opportunity to go home and be around their family. But when they come back, and even during the discretionary period, and they start to continue to flourish in those relationships and build that work that's not necessarily laid out for them, but just the ownership of what that looks like together. I think we'll see that team accelerate the improvement process here over the next month until we really officially kick back in when the discretionary period ends. So I think this is a critical time. Everything's critical, right? But just now that we've set kind of some standards and some benchmarks about how it looks, we've had a good amount of time with them, and I just think it's going to be really important here this next month and a half as we break away to kind of continue that momentum and then take the reins of what this team in 21 is going to look like.
Just the knowledge that you like to cross-train players and get them ready at different positions just in case. Has Kevin Knowles' performance this spring given you the idea that maybe he could just rotate anywhere?
Well, I think so. Kevin, we brought him in as a nickel. We recruited him as a corner that we knew could play nickel. And we made the decision to put him at nickel just to get him involved in as much football action as possible. You can go play corner, and that's got its own pluses and minuses to it, but just to put him more in the middle of the formation and force him to react, put him in more tackling situations, make him an active blitzer, it forced that development. And we were going to know really early, okay, was it going to be too fast for him and then kick him back out? But early on, we realized he was mature beyond his years. He's a really good communicator. He's got the skill set to play inside or outside. So that was the movement about putting him at nickel. We just wanted to put him, for lack of a better term, in the fire for as long as we could and then see what it looked like. But I think he's grown, and it gives us the flexibility to play Jamie Summit safety too. And just, listen, we're trying to get our best 11 out there, but then you can get the 12, 13, 14. And but Kevin definitely, his stock went up this spring. Nothing that I didn't see happening because of who he is and what we thought of him coming out of MacArthur, but really happy about Kevin right now.
It seemed like some of the young defensive tackles, played pretty well in the spring game, at least from what we could tell. I mean, Briggs and Malcolm Ray and Josh Farmer. How good do you feel about that rotation coming out of the spring?
I think we've got some depth. We still need to continue to push the quality of play from the top all the way to the bottom. But, I was happy. I think Fabian Levin has really developed. Happy with his production and where he's headed. I think Dennis and Coop are both pushing to try to get that next tier so that we can get that consistent play. But the one thing about defensive tackle is, I know you're putting two out there for the most time, but you need legitimately 4 guys to play at a really high level. Just because of the physicality, the demand of the effort that you need at that position. So if you need 4, you definitely need a 5th, because one injury away, you need that rotation. So, I think, Josh Farmer, I'm really happy with him. He's somebody that came in, he's already up to 280 pounds. So physically, he's starting to put the frame on. That's not a position that you think freshmen can play, just because of the physical demands. It's a grown-up position, especially in the ACC and at this level. So, but Josh has shown over the course of these 3 months that he's willing and able to do it. Just, we've got to get him ready for what that role will be.
Perry's question kind of touched on this when he talked about moving Jamie from nickel to safety possibly. You guys have a lot of DBs. I know you want to put a lot of them on the field. Can you just talk about the approach to playing them, trying to get groups that work well together, mixing it up depending on opponents you see, just all the intricacies of having so many bodies at your disposal?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Chris, because there's concept teaching that you're always trying to hit, because as you sit down in meetings, you install something and the corner wants to say, okay, what do I do? The nickel, what do I do? The Mike, what do I do? The free safety, okay, what's my job description in this play? And that's important, right? But sometimes that's backwards teaching. You want it just installed as a concept so they can learn the overall approach. Some guys learn really well like that, And those are the pieces that you feel like you can teach and move around a little bit more. Because whatever the coverage tool or the blitz or the front tool that you're going to use, if the players just remember it as how it affects them and not how it affects everybody, it doesn't allow for the growth that you want, as the season goes, because we have depth now, but you know how that thing goes. I mean, we saw it last year, depth on day one doesn't always look that way on week 6. So, there are some guys that learn that way, and I think those are the guys you want to have the flexibility with to, number one, match up personnel against other teams. Because Jamie doesn't match up with every slot in the ACC the same way, just like Jarvis Brownlee or Jermaine Jones or however that's going to look. So you do want to be able to move some pieces around, but the details of the coaching is kind of where you need to make the decision of, okay, am I taking a step backwards by moving this player around? I mean, last year, Travis Jay played every position, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. So there's certain guys you want to leave alone. There's certain guys that offer the flexibility to move around, not only because of their skill set, but just because of the way they learn and the way they approach the game, and you won't be taking a step back by moving that position.
There were 2 defensive backs I wanted to get your thoughts on, Adam. First, Jermaine Jones. Seems like every time we were in practice, he was making a play. I know you talked about consistency with him before. I guess, where was that growth this spring in that area? And then secondly, was Akeem Dent. Coach Norvell talked about him and kind of responding to negative plays. I guess, where did he grow, or how did he do in that area this spring?
Yeah, well, Jermaine Jones had a great offseason. I mean, he put on really good weight. His confidence was really high. The positive thing about him is he was really consistent from a standpoint of his impact and takeaways. He was around the ball a lot this spring, and his make a play grade was really good, especially with the ball in the air. We got to continue to squeeze out some of the tackling, some of the just recognition things, the communication. But as far as his press technique got better, constantly working at his hands and where those are at. But I think he did take steps this spring. Had some healthy with him, but I really think his physical skills have really started to improve, especially with the way he's put on that good weight and strength in the offseason. Akeem, it showed up right in the spring game. They went after him on a 3rd down. Malik made a one-on-one play, and then at the end of the second quarter when he came back there and made 2 back-to-back plays, that's really good to see. Nobody's going to make every play. You want to be in position. Listen, you want to be 100% of your make a play grades. That in a really good team, you're in that percentage. But in a big picture, you just want to see the response, and to see that from Akeem was a positive. I know we pointed that out at the unit meeting there the other day, and proud of his response, especially at the end of the spring.
All right, thank you, Coach.
Thanks, guys.